All right, thank you so much, Natalie. We are so pleased to have everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us. I am calling in from Zurich, Switzerland, which is why you hear church bells ringing at the top of the hour here from a small little town. We're so grateful for everyone to be with us today and for joining us for this special World Refugee Day event. A couple of housekeeping items. Today's discussion will be recorded and shared with Their Stories, Our Story on our YouTube and on our website. We also welcome any comments and questions in the chat. And also, if you'd like to introduce yourself, share your name and where you're from, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your story as well. We look forward to celebrating World Refugee Day on Monday, June 20th. And in preparation, we are so lucky to have several refugees and refugee advocates who are here today to talk about what does welcoming look like. And we've had the pleasure of working with several of these people, and we've been so inspired by their stories, and we know you will be too. So to get us started, we're going to turn it over to Their Stories, Our Stories Executive Director, Kristen Daly. Kristen.
Thank you so much, Darian. As of May 23rd, we passed a really depressing milestone, one that I hoped that we would never pass. But in May 23rd, UNHCR, which is the United Nations Refugee Agency, or the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, reported that more than 100 million people had been forcibly displaced from their homes due to violence, conflict, persecution, and human rights violations. Just to give you perspective, last year at this time, that number was 82.4 million. So we've had the largest single one-year increase in history. We've all watched why this has happened with the events in Afghanistan and Ukraine, but also in Congo, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and several other countries where conflicts are driving people from their homes. If you look at the table that's on the slide, you can see that the number doubled from 2010 to 2020. And I always refer to this as the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time, because when people are displaced, it breaks all the other links that are essential to their lives as well. It breaks relationships with family, friends, needed support services, whether that's education or just plain shelter. And this is the kind of number that's really impossible to comprehend. Natalie, if you'd go to the next slide, I want to talk about what a refugee is. So about 1/3 of those 100 million people who have been displaced have actually had to leave their countries to find safety. The definition of refugee comes from the 1951 Refugee Convention. And it is, if you notice, it is a definition that talks about people who are forced to leave their homes in order to find safety as a result of one of 5 things. And this is a little outdated, but this is where we are as a result of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. What I would point out is not there is environmental concerns. Go on to the next slide as well, Natalie. This is another definition for refugees. Refugees are people who have fled war, violence, conflict, persecution in order to find safety. When I talked about that 100 million threshold that we just passed, that number is one that it makes us feel hopeless. It makes us feel helpless. In fact, it's numbing and desensitizing. And that is the reason why TSOS exists. It turns out we do not make decisions based on statistics. We make decisions when we are moved and when we can see where we can make a difference. If you could go to the next slide, Natalie. My favorite quote this year is from Trevor Noah, and it was we watched all of the people fleeing Ukraine. He said, anyone could become a refugee. It's a thing that happens to you. It's not who you are. But when we see headlines and we see stats, we lose the perspective on the individuals behind them. So stories humanize those statistics. Those individual stories are critical. They remind us that each number represents a person with an identity, experience, and dreams. These are sisters, mothers, fathers, sons, friends, and neighbors. Natalie, can we go to the next slide? We are a nonprofit organization that collects and shares the experiences of refugees and allies to encourage empathy, advance public policy, and help communities welcome people who are forcibly displaced. Today, we get to learn from the personal experiences of some of these people and those who have welcomed them, so we can talk about what welcome looks like and how we can all play a role in that. Back to you, Darian.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We have a couple of our panelists who weren't able to join us for this live event, so we've pre-recorded their segments, and we're going to turn it over to that recording now with Josh Mojica, the co-founder of Goodfavor. And Natalie, it seems like the audio is not coming through.
Okay, thank you.
In the meantime, let me just tell you a little bit about Josh.
That was
Here we have it.
All right, let's
Mojica was
try
here
that
with us
again.
today, and he is the founder of Goodfavor. Josh, thanks for being here. And we're just going to dive right into that first question about you
Sure.
being on the border of Poland and Ukraine just a couple months ago, right at the heat of everything. Can you color the picture for us? Just tell us what was going on there.
That was a lot of organized chaos, to be honest. A lot of groups, a lot of NGOs, grassroots organizations from all over Poland, all over the EU, in this one concentrated area along the border. I visited maybe 3 to 4 sites, doing a lot of good, giving out the basics, getting stuff done, getting everything I needed to do done. But very disorganized, a lot of organizations working very separately. And so it was kind of this beautiful organized chaos is what you might call it.
And tell us about Goodfavor, because you were there to kind of help create some order.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we do basically is just come into these areas of crisis and just go in and assess. And what we did in our assessment was find out the main needs of some of the core groups working along the Ukraine and Polish border. And what we found was that there was a huge need, a huge lack of support on the Ukraine side of one of the major border stations. And so my team decided to come in, have a meeting with their main coordinator, and just kind of help create a plan to make their operation more efficient. So we were there for a week, just handing out, getting a lot of distribution, aid operations, just more efficient, buttoned up. We set up at least 4 or 5. We raised a lot of money to get a lot of aid into those groups and to get more volunteers from the Poland side over to Ukraine to help this group become a little more stable.
That's amazing. Now, obviously, when you were there, you were seeing a lot of the firsthand people and their needs and what was going on. Can you tell us a little bit about the Ukrainians who were crossing, also like the demographic of other refugees who were crossing, and maybe some of the discrimination that was going on there?
Yes, so most of my work has been mainly in Greece, working with Middle Eastern refugees, Syrians, Afghans, all those people. And so being in Poland and seeing Ukrainians come over with so little resistance was a little bit shocking to me. I thought there'd be more immigration type of, hiccups happening, but they were welcomed freely, I think, because for a lot of reasons, culturally they look similar, they have similar backgrounds. And so I think the Polish people were very quick to help people in those types of circumstances where they can see themselves in these people. Unfortunately, though, there are still others, such as Afghans. Recently we saw the situation in Afghanistan erupt, and there are people pushing along the Polish border trying to, find refuge that are still being turned away at the border. And there's a spectrum of treatment for those people, from kind of like a no, go away, to, some violence along the border, and a lot of really harsh pushbacks. And so bringing those situations to light is really important, but it's really hard to talk about because the situation, is so complicated for most people to handle. I think they can only really just kind of focus it on like what's in front of them. And so it's those people from Ukraine right now.
Yeah. And given that complicated answer and those complicated situations, for you, what does welcome look like? Because you've seen the spectrum, right? You explained being in Greece.
Yeah. Yeah, I think welcome for me is just, it's a big hug. It's bringing that warmth, that community, that support to someone who's in need. Obviously, um, we can't do that for everybody when you're working with mass loads of people coming in. But I think that on all fronts, whether it's military, volunteers, medical, anybody just needs to, without any judgment, just be welcoming to people and making them feel safe. Um, and that's really difficult for some people to do. But I think that with safety comes just, humanity in general. And I always used to tell my refugees in Syria from Syria to keep their smile. And so I think a warm hug and a smile is really what welcome looks like. So.
That's great. I love that. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. No problem.
Thank you. So please, Josh Mojica. We we were thrilled to have Josh with us, and unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. But we do have his story on our website, a little bit more about the work that he was doing along the border in Ukraine and Poland, and just a very interesting piece. I want to encourage you and remind you, for people who have joined, welcome, and feel free to use the chat. If you have other questions, we'll be recording all of the questions, and we'll be continuing these stories and these interviews as we continue celebrating World Refugee Day. And also feel free to introduce yourself as well. Next up, I want to introduce Shelby Dobbs, who is with us. She is the co-founder of Operation Ukrainians to Ramstein. And Shelby, we're so grateful for you to be here with us. Can you start by just sharing a little bit about your organization? You helped more than 100 displaced persons from Ukraine resettle in Germany. Can you tell us a little bit about the demographics of those people, what you've done to create a welcoming community for them?
Yeah, so our team first was the demographics. We had families from big cities and rural areas, Kiev, Mariupol, Kharkiv, and then rural areas where they barely have roads or running water. We also had students that were living in Ukraine from Nigeria and Ghana that we helped. And it was we kind of covered every type of family that you could, with moms and their children, with husbands who had medical issues that were allowed to evacuate, grandparents and single women that were traveling alone, and then single men who were students. So we kind of covered every multitude of demographic there. And our team put together, or Jesse and Jessica, our other founders, put together this incredible team to really help have a well-rounded support for these families that were coming in. They had a translation team. We had a donation team that covered all their essential needs and even provided meals for the families that were hosting and for the Ukrainian families. We created a private group for hosts to connect with each other. We had a private chat for all of the Ukrainians in our area on Viber that they could just kind of reach out to these places, and anytime they need anything. One time somebody got stuck on their balcony and locked out, so they could just reach out in that group, and somebody from the community came to help every single time. So that's really, I think, the biggest way that we welcome them and create this support network and community for them.
That's incredible. I mean, just to even have someone on immediate emergency standby with a WhatsApp group. Yeah, what a workflow to figure out. And on top of that, finding available housing is probably one of the biggest universal challenges to support displaced families right now. And what does that look like for your group?
I think that definitely was the biggest challenge of the whole operation. And we actually had to stop bringing families in because Germany reached their quota, or our area was so saturated that they were talking about not letting people register because there was just no housing for them. And we were really, really blessed with a local German who helped us place all of our families. She kind of became friends with all of the city workers and government workers and gave us that in where we could call for help. But really, we just, we spent a lot of time on the rental websites. Every night, every morning, there was at least 5 of us just looking.
Shelby, I don't know if this is just on my end, but I have lost you. Is that just on my end, Natalie?
No, I think we might have lost Shelby for a second there.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. So just to give a little background as we're waiting for Shelby to jump back in. So she's in Germany, and yes, this project of hers has just been.
And so finding,
Oh,
go
Shelby, you're
ahead.
back with us. No, please, thank you. Sorry, we lost you for a moment. I think we might have lost her again. We'll come back to Shelby if she has a
That's all
chance to jump back in. But in the meantime, Natalie, if we don't mind if we go over to the next panelist, Egette Indelele. She also was not able to join us live, but we recorded a wonderful interview with her. She is the CEO and co-founder and founder of Safe Haven Space. So if we can go to that recording now. Thanks, Natalie. Thank you so much for being with us. We are pleased to have Egette Indelele with us. She is the CEO and founder of Safe Haven Space. And Egette, we're going to start with asking you, tell us a little bit about you. Thank you so much for being with us. We are pleased to have Egette Indelele with us. She is the CEO and founder of Safe Haven Space. And Egette, we're going to start with asking you, tell us a little bit about your story and how it inspired you to create Safe Haven Space.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for just giving me this platform and welcoming me to learn more about myself and my organization. Just to begin, so as she mentioned, my name is Egette Indelele, and I am the founder of Safe Haven Space, an organization that support refugees and educate refugee communities on mental wellness. So the reason why I started Safe Haven Space was just to create a safe space for refugees. So I'm a former refugee. I was born in Tanzania, Africa, in a refugee camp. And I came to the United States when I was 8 years old. And when we came to the United States, my family had experienced many traumatic experiences, just being in refugees for over 30 years and surviving a genocide. So they already had a lot of trauma and stressful experiences that they went through. And I saw what those events did to my family. It was hard to communicate. It was hard to welcoming conversation about how you're doing, or just your well-being wasn't normalized. So as I got into high school, I learned a lot about psychology and mental health. And then it was until high school where I met a lot of friends who were immigrants and who were also former refugees. So we all found ourselves just talking about why our parents don't communicate as much as that we want to. They don't welcome our feelings, or it's just hard to bring those things up. So it was then that I realized that the importance of having a safe space, even though it's not normalized in our home culture, that having a safe space for refugees and immigrants would help and support them. Like, although they weren't getting it at home, there was a space that they were getting that from. So it was learning about mental health, but also while having access to mental health professionals and mental health supporters. So that's when I started it. And then I got into an entrepreneurship program at George Mason. And in that entrepreneurship program, we did intensive research just to figure out if this was the right thing for the students that we were focused on in. And then 2 years later, we got a 501c3. So we're a nonprofit right now. So that's me and my background.
What an important endeavor. That is so valuable. Like you said, so many refugees experiencing such trauma and needing a place that they can share those emotions. Just following up on that, what do you think the biggest challenges are refugees face in terms of mental health?
Mm-hmm. Right now is the stigma that surrounds mental health, and also understanding what mental health is. I think that's what makes it challenging to look for mental health support or seek therapy. It's just the stigma that surrounds it, and learning little by little about mental health and what it is, we believe that it would reduce the stigma.
And in terms of that, helping reduce the stigma, helping open those emotions, being open to them, what does welcome look like to you to help get rid of that stigma?
Yeah. For me, welcome means welcoming everything, anything that the the refugee communities are coming with, their culture norms, their language, and actually with Safe Haven Space, that's what we truly look into when we create our programs. We have translators. We do research on the programs that we have to make sure that we're reaching them through the culture that they're from and the language and the religion.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to learning more about Safe Haven Space, and everyone following your organization will encourage that as well.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. And Shelby, we are so happy that we have you back. Thanks so much for joining us back again. I know technical issues happen. We're rolling with it. I love that we had a question in the meantime from our attendees. Garrett, thanks for sending this in. I want to ask you, Shelby, this is so important, especially as Garrett mentioned, Ukrainian refugees are going to be relocating into a lot of other places. So what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome with the setup of your operations?
I think the biggest challenges were the language barrier. So we created a team of translators. So I think that is key. Sometimes all of our hosts communicated with Google Translate a lot, but sometimes it doesn't get the message across. So having a team of translators that could kind of come in once a week or do a phone call with our families was key, because sometimes we would think they understand completely what we're doing in the processes. And then once our translator went in, we realized they didn't understand anything that we had just told them. Another thing was just understanding the processes that they had to go through in Germany to register and receive housing and benefits. So I think if you could compile all of that information and processes before they get there, that would save you a lot of headache and a lot of time.
That's so great. What great advice. And yes, yeah, having that language barrier taken care of, that really shows welcome, which is what I want to ask you last. What does welcome look like to you, having this experience that you're currently going in right now, and also dealing with all of that, the setup to get to where you're at?
Yeah, so welcome to me, it's really just all of our community members that stepped up and said, hey, I have this talent and I have this skill. How can I help? We had bakers who baked cakes for special occasions for our families that just got there, and people who set up their own personal fundraisers, whether it was baking cakes and purchasing produce boxes to deliver to their houses. We had our whole donations team that met every essential need. They even set up a meal train and provided meal kits and gift cards. Our translation team was always on call for phone calls, appointments, landlord conversations, just to help out in that way. There's just literally every community member, they just seemed to rally together and just offer whatever support they could. Our hosts opening their homes and lives to these families for an undefined amount of time. They really didn't know how long it was going to be. And each host just said, you know, this is no longer my house, this is your house too, and you're a part of our family now. So we really want you to feel welcome. And even now they're celebrating birthdays together, even after they've moved out of the house. So I just think giving them that community and being there for them when they need things and meeting those needs is what welcome looks like.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I love what you said, that every person gave the support that they could, which is so encouraging for volunteers or people who want to get involved. You don't have to be able to do everything. You don't even have to speak the language, right? If someone has that skill, they can use it. If someone else has a skill of baking a cake, you can use that skill too. That's just beautiful. Shelby, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. All right, we are going to turn it over now to two individuals that I know and love well, and they are part of the Their Story is Our Story volunteer team. We have Shurooq Jewari, who is the Utah Community Programs Coordinator, and then we have Rawah Atemsh, and she is the California Community Programs Coordinator. And Rawah and Shurooq, we are just thrilled that you're here to share a little bit about your journey and your story, both previous refugees and just recently received their citizenship in the US, and we are, congratulations, first and foremost. And we're just thrilled to ask you a little bit about that. Can you tell us a little bit about the process and what it has meant to each of you personally? Let's start with Rawah.
Hi, Darian. Thank you for having me today. I would like to go and introduce myself. My name is Rawah Atemsh. I am a program coordinator in California. So to begin, I came here like 6 years ago with no language, and then we started, from the zero. How I, the process of became like a citizen, it was like a long process, long way, but we waited, and then in the end, we are here. I became a citizen. I was like happy when I got my citizenship, to be honest. We cried because it was like such a long time. At the end, we received the citizenship to pay our hard work for the 6 years. It was not easy, but here we are.
Congratulations, Rawah. That's incredible. And like you said, yeah, starting from zero to, where you are today, it's really wonderful to be able to see that. And we have some of those stories also on our TSOS website. So I encourage everyone to go look up Rawah and her story there. Shurooq, that same question for you. How has this process, what has it meant to you personally? How has it been for you?
Hi, Darian. Thank you for having me on this webinar. I agree, 100% agree with Rawah. It was a very long, difficult process, and it had so many steps, but I feel like at the end it was so worth it.
Well, congratulations. Shurooq, I want to jump into a question for you. You have been taking, this responsibility as being a volunteer with TSOS in stride, and we have been watching you with Miss Utah, Sasha Sloan, sharing presentations all over the state of Utah about belonging begins with a name. Can you tell us a little bit about how knowing someone's name promotes belonging and promotes welcome?
So for the last year, just like you said, I've collaborated with Miss Utah 2021, Sasha Sloan, on education curriculum. And part of this curriculum is talking about the question, where are you from? And then we recommend that instead of starting a conversation with a refugee or anyone else by the question, where are you from? We recommend that to start it by asking about their name, because by asking about their name, you're not only asking about their name, but you're also asking about the story behind their name, which will eventually make them feel appreciated and belonged in the community.
I love that. And you still are giving these presentations. So if anyone is interested, yes, please reach out to us. We would love to get you connected with Shurooq. Now, this is a question for both of you. What are ways that you have, that others have helped you feel welcome? And then also on the opposite side, what support do you wish you had had maybe to make it a little bit easier and to feel more welcome in your communities when you arrived to the United States? And let's start, Shurooq, we'll just start with you since you're off of mute. Yeah,
I feel like I've been here I've been living here in Utah for 9 years, and I didn't feel welcomed at all until I joined TSOS last year. I feel like they gave me the platform to share my voice and the story however I wanted to, and then which eventually made me feel that they appreciate me, and that they're so grateful for having me, which also made me feel I belonged. And then I wish that I had that support from TSOS back then when I first arrived to Utah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, finding an organization or a group that you feel connected with is so important. Rawah, same question for you. What about you? How did others help you feel welcome? And what were some things you wish you had had?
So for me, when I started here back then in 2016, we've been connected to volunteers who've been helping me and my family with the language specifically. As I said, I came here from zero. I don't speak English at all. I received a help as welcoming, teaching me English, applying for, driver license, college, jobs, opportunity, how to deal with the interviews. As I said, I never had a job. I never had interview before. So all those support, it meant a lot to me. And it guides me to the way that I am now. Because all those supports, it means a lot to the refugee when they arrive to the new country, such as United States. It's a huge country, and for me, I was not speaking English at all until I start my first job at Walmart. So I learned it all from the volunteers that work with me and from the customers at Walmart. So it was like a big help.
That's wonderful. I love that part of your story, that it was through volunteers, but also just through your own initiative to go to find a job and to work and interact with just everyday people around you. That's really great. Okay, we have a question from the chat. We want to hear about your names. So Shurooq and Rawah, will you tell us a little bit about your names, since we touched on that earlier? Shurooq, do you mind starting for us?
Yeah, so my name actually means sunrise. And then a funny story behind it is that my dad actually named me after his favorite TV show host.
I love that. That's awesome. Good for your dad. It's a beautiful name. I love sunrise. Rawah, what about you?
Me, I'm the opposite. I'm the sunset. She's the sunrise. I'm the sunset.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even know that about you too. I just love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. Now, this is also kind of an opposite question for you. We would love for you to tell us about Muslim women and choosing whether to wear a hijab or not. Rawah, do you mind starting for us?
Sure.
Or I guess, no, Shurooq. We decided that, yeah, Shurooq, you were going to start with us. Do you mind sharing with us why you choose to wear a hijab?
I think that a common misconception here in the US that Muslim women are forced to wear the hijab, which is not accurate. It says it in our holy book, the Quran, that it is a choice. And so, for example, I choose to wear it, but my younger and older sisters do not wear it. And then I choose to wear it because it gives me a closer connection to God and my faith, and it also represents who I am and what I stand for.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And Rawah, what about you?
To be honest, I chose not to wear it because I will have like more freedom on the dress code. Because if I wear the hijab, I will have, I have to be like wear type like, long, and to be like kind of, I don't know, but I will say I chose not to wear it because of I want to have more choice in the dress code. But
great.
we both practicing. She go to the mosque, I go to the mosque, and as Shurooq said, it's a choice.
I love that you shared that, and so nice that you're both sharing your different choices and clearing up some misconceptions too for communities who don't know about Muslim traditions. So thank you. And our final question that I've asked all of our panelists so far: what does welcome look like to you? You've kind of touched on this a bit, but we'd love to hear from your perspective. Rawah, will you start for us?
To me, as a refugee, welcome, it means anything that can help. For example, helping with the language, helping with the transportation, any opportunity that we can help, it means welcome it. It doesn't matter if we do speak the language or not, but since we can offer the help, that means a lot to the refugee.
Thank you. Yes, anything can help. I love that. Shurooq, do you mind answering that question as well? What does welcome look like to you?
To me, it means walking down a road or into a company or a classroom and being able to share my opinions and thoughts freely without anyone telling me to go back to my country.
So important, so important. And that is something that, as both of you know, as we're all volunteers with Their Stories, Our Story, we're clearing up the misconceptions and the perceptions of people everywhere around the world. So thank you so much for your volunteer work and for the way that you're using your voice to help refugees everywhere. And thanks for joining us today. We will
Thank you.
now pass it over to Wendy Chan. Thank you so much for joining us, Wendy. She is the co-founder of One Journey, also our partner in our event today. Wendy Chan, we're so pleased to have you. And I am going to dive into the first question with you right away. As the founder of multiple refugee organizations, nonprofit organizations, what have you learned about the importance of building community and creating welcome for those around you? Oh, you're on mute for us, Wendy.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to co-host this event with your story. Their story is our story, and to have this opportunity to share a little bit more about One Journey. And so Darian, that question is so important because building community is at such a heart, it's at the heart of what we're doing at One Journey. As we have heard from multiple panelists today, that their journey of welcoming refugees into a new home country is a long journey. It is not something that can be done in a couple of days or even a couple of months. It's really holding them tight and helping them to get along the journey in order to really feel fully integrated and be welcomed by the local host community. And in order to do that, you need a broad range of stakeholders, a broad range of communities to all step in to really embrace these newcomers into this new community. And I often wanted to kind of go back to this African proverb that we hear all the time, that if you want to go far, go alone. But if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's the same concept about community building for refugee integration, that we wanted to all be in together so that we can help refugees and any newcomers who are different from us, who have come from a different culture, to build their lives in the new country that they can really flourish and thrive. And so that is the mission of One Journey, and that is the mission of Nova Friends of Refugees as well, where we are connecting multiple players, the private sector, the NGO leaders, the refugees themselves, really creating that space for people to come together, to learn about each other's stories, their life journey, to really recognizing each other's talents in order for us to build a welcoming community for all to thrive in.
Wendy, I love that. And as we've heard from so many of our panelists today, there is this gap that needs to be filled. And these nonprofit organizations that have been created to fill the needs for refugees in many ways, whether it was with mental health, with Egette. We'd love to hear more about what are some of the gaps that your nonprofit fills and other nonprofits like yours can fill for refugees.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think this goes back to the reason why I started One Journey. I started One Journey back in during the height of Syrian refugee crisis, when we're seeing horrific images of refugees being drowned in the Aegean Sea, watching the bodies of some of the young children wash ashore. I was deeply disturbed. At the same time, there was an anti-immigrant and anti-refugee rhetoric in the public discourse, with our politicians and elected officials branding refugees as cost to our society and challenge and threats to our society. And as an immigrant myself, with refugee stories in my family, my grandfather was a refugee who fled China during the Civil War and went to Hong Kong in order to escape the communist takeover. And my own family, I'm an immigrant, my parents are immigrants, we came from China, and I grew up in blue-collar immigrant community, and I know that refugees and immigrants are anything but cost to our society, threats to our society. So that's why I co-founded One Journey. When Vanda and I kind of brainstorm on what can we do to change that narrative, because we know that the narrative is so wrong. We talked to multiple organizations, we talked to all the resettlement agencies. We wanted to make sure that we're doing something that is filling in the gap rather than reinventing the wheel. And we know that there are so many organizations that are doing great work in actually providing services and help to the refugees themselves, but all of them are asking for help in being that kind of doing that narrative shifting work, in really highlighting and providing that visibility so that refugees can be recognized as talents, as who they are, and as contributor to our society. And thus, we founded One Journey, which is really a grassroots movement. It's 100% powered by volunteers. And what we do is we create large-scale events across the country, including our flagship One Journey Festival that will be coming up on June 25th at the National Cathedral, where we're creating that space for refugees to come and share their stories of resilience and hope, for refugees performers from all over the country to come and perform and celebrate and sing songs. And we also have a technology component where we're showcasing using virtual reality for people to kind of bring them back to the life of the refugees who are still living at camps in order to build that compassion, and so that we can move people to take action in our Take Action tent, where we are featuring of 35 plus organizations. They're doing great work locally or globally to support refugees. Earlier, I saw that there was a question about how to support Ukrainian refugees. There will be there's an organization called Welcome.us who will be there to talk about how do you help bring Ukrainian refugees, how do you become a sponsor in order to help Ukrainian refugees to come to the United States. So there are multiple ways people can take action at the One Journey Festival. And again, our goal is really fill in that gap, to do that narrative shifting work, to really provide that platform for refugees to tell their own stories in order for the community as a whole, the country as a whole, to recognize that refugees are people we want to welcome, and they absolutely contribute to our diversity and the fabric of our community.
So wonderful, Wendy. And we're so looking forward to the One Journey Festival. Thanks for sharing so much with us. And I love that you said that's just the goal of all these organizations working together to change the narrative, because you're absolutely right. Refugees, immigrants, all welcome and such contributors in our communities when we take the opportunity to welcome them. I want to ask, I've been looking at the attendees list, and I know so many will watch the recording. A question that probably many will have at the end of this is, what can I do individually to help and to support refugees in my own community? Of course, we have these incredible events that are happening. Thank you all for joining us here, and then also attending events like the One Journey Festival. But what can people do in their community, in their home, maybe just even on their street, in their neighborhood?
Great question. And I love that question, because at the end of the day, it's really about taking that concrete action to welcome refugees. There are so many different things you can do in the community. I would say first and foremost, get to know the local resettlement agencies. There are more than 250 resettlement agency affiliates across the country, believe it or not, and they're doing incredible work supporting refugees integration and helping them to be in the community. So if you wanted to find out about how to welcome refugees, I would say get in touch with your local resettlement agencies. Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, has a beautiful, wonderful interactive online directory where you can click to your state and find out all the resettlement agencies' contact on their website. The other great place to look for is the welcome.us website, where they also feature local organizations, resettlement agencies, and non-resettlement agencies, such as many great organizations who are on the call today, like Homes Without Border, for you to kind of engage and sign up to volunteer with those organizations. So welcome.us is another great place to go. Last but not least, go to our One Journey website. We do have a Take Action tab where we feature many of the refugee performers and even refugee entrepreneurs that we're supporting. So you can actually purchase products directly from their website in order to support the livelihood of those refugees. So there are so many different ways to engage and involve. Resettlement agencies and welcome.us and One Journey website are all great places to start.
I love that. So many good ideas. And I love that in the chat, people are throwing out more ideas. So please, please continue to share more. And I love the question that was presented. What are you going to do to start creating welcome in your community? And, you know, just the inspiration to learn some new ideas from today's conversation. And Wendy, our final question for you. What does welcome look like to you?
Welcome, and I think all of the panelists did such a beautiful job of talking about what welcome looks like to them and to me, and I concur with every single one of them. I would also add that to me, welcome is a mindset. It's a mindset that you look at that individual, another individual who may look different from you, who may come from a different culture, and know that we are connected as one human being. And I apologize, I am so emotional and oftentimes ended up in having these conversations with, you know, tears in my eyes, because I think it is so important that we recognize the individual and recognize that we are so connected as humanity. Borrowing Martin Luther King's great quote that we are all connected in one great chain of humanity. And so to know that what's happening to refugees in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Rohingya, the Rohingya refugees, you know, what's happening in Ukraine and Ethiopia and Afghanistan, that also is impacting us as well. So, you know, I think the pandemic is a great microcosm of how something started in a different part of the country can eventually translate and impact all of our lives. And I think, you know, the issue of humanity, an issue of humanitarian situation is just the same. So it is really that mindset that we all need to see this as part of our responsibility, and doing everything we can, whether it's just a smile, if that's all we can do, or it's a big, you know, financial support, or it's galvanizing the community to step up. I think all of that are acts of welcome, but it all starts with the mindset that we're connected as one human being. And last, I just wanted to quote, the motto of One Journey is many paths, one journey. And it's all about how we're walking on many paths of life, but we're really traveling on one journey of humanity together. And thank you.
Wendy, thank you so, so much for sharing the emotion, the inspiring words. As you were speaking, I just was thinking what an honor it is for me to be here, to be the one to asking these questions, and for all of us as attendees to learn from you and from all of our panelists today. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to pass it over to Kristen for some final words. Kristen?
Thank you so much, Darian. And thank you everybody who participated. I'm invigorated, I'm inspired, and I'm overwhelmed. And I hope that everybody else feels that way too. Wendy, I constantly think of the Martin Luther King quote that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I also have to praise you for the work on welcome.us. I will say that is a fabulous resource for anybody who wants to know what's going on in their community. I work with sponsor circles in the Seattle area, and I am always pointing people to that resource. So in the United States, that is a great one. For us at TSOS, we hope that the work that we do helps to invigorate and enable others to do even more. By sharing one story at a time, we believe we can break down the barriers that prevent effective welcome for newcomers in our communities. As I pointed out, we don't make decisions on data. We make decisions, we take action when we're moved by emotion and most of all, understanding. When we meet each other on a personal level, then we can see what role we can play personally. It isn't this huge amorphous global problem, but it's my neighbor, it's my friend, it's the person down the street. So taking time to make space and listen to someone else's story expands our understanding of each other and our world. It helps us see past labels and see opportunities to act and contribute and participate in problem solving. Sharing firsthand experience is not just nice, it's essential to creating communities where we are all welcome and valued. So among all the other things there are to do, and believe me, there are many, there's a role for everybody in this work. If you're inspired by the change that's possible with our storytelling approach, please consider donating to Their Story is Our Story. Your financial support makes our work possible. We are an all-volunteer organization, and your donation goes directly to the costs associated with the collection, production, and distribution of refugee stories. That includes translation, transcription, travel, equipment, lots of software, and more. To donate, you can visit tsosrefugees.org/donate, as is on the slide. There you'll see options to make a one-time donation or to join our publishers group, which is individuals who make small donations on a monthly basis to sustain the work we do. But most of all, I would encourage you just to find a place where you can make a difference. I know most of you already are, and I'm grateful for the time that you've taken today to talk about probably something that has meant more to me in my life and has enriched my experiences more than anything else I've endeavored to do. Back to you, Darian.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We're going to pull up this last slide. I love this thought. You never know a person until you know their story. And so true, especially just being here and listening to just a handful of stories from refugees and refugee advocates today. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here. And thank you to all for joining us, our attendees, and to those who will be watching the recording. And the stories don't end here. Thank you for everyone who's contributed in the chat. We will have these questions, and we will continue to ask these questions as we do Instagram Lives with some of these individuals that we've done panelists that have been on the panel today, or share their stories on our website. So continue to engage with us there. And of course, you can follow all of our social media accounts. Their Stories, Our Stories on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and TikTok, and join and engage with us there. And as Kristen said, I echo that. Find a way that you can make a difference in your own community with your own neighbors and all those around you. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today.